What's up, guys? Welcome back. I just want to start off by saying happy holidays to everybody, all the subscribers, all the non-subscribers. I hope everybody has a very eventful and prosperous new year coming up. And I appreciate the page growth, and I appreciate everybody who tunes into the videos, shares, likes, subscribes, comments, all that. I really, really appreciate it because it's a lot of fun for me to talk about this stuff. Today we're going to talk about some Fender mods to kind of get that Texas tone that everybody wants to go after. I helped out my buddy Matthew Scott, who also has a YouTube channel. I help him a little bit with his amps, and there was one video in particular, this one, where I helped him get some, achieve a little bit of a cleaner but like grittier SRV tone. And a lot of people do ask me, what I did or what I do to the Blackface amps. And I can talk about it. They're very quick, simple mods, a couple of things to try, and you can really tune your ear into hearing what you like and what you dislike. These mods will work on the reissue amps as well. It doesn't have to be an old amp. They're easily reversible. They don't cause harm. You're not modifying circuits. You don't have to get out the solder or anything like that. But we'll get into them, and I'll show you what I like to do to a Blackface amp to kind of achieve a tighter, cleaner SRV style tone, if you will. So we'll take this amp for instance. This is a 1965 Deluxe Reverb. Disregard the speaker for now. We're going to talk about that later. But if I'm going for a cleaner type of Texas SRV sound, there are a few mainstay things I do. First of all, I will remove... Well, I'll give you a quick explanation of what's going on here. These are, when you hear people talking about V1, V2, this is your V. V1, V2, V3, V4, V5, V6. And most Fender amps will have this tube chart inside there, letting you know, correlating the specific tube to the spot. But what I will do is, if I can explain this amp to you, the signal is kind of split between V1 and V2 here. Now, V2 would be for your vibrato channel. V1 is for your normal channel. Not really desirable on the Blackface amps because, face it, when you play through the normal channel, they sound a bit sterile and they don't really have any give to them. And you get a lot of ambience if you play into the vibrato channel. You have reverb, and the reverb creates its own natural distortion in the circuit. So what I will do is I like to totally remove V1 from the amp, and I will also, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'll come over to the vibrato tube, and I'll also take that out. Okay, now, you ask what that does. So the signal is split between these two tubes. This is a quick explanation. This is not exact. This is not an amp techie explanation. First of all, let me get that out of the way. I'm just going to break this down so we all can understand it and how I like to explain it to people. This signal coming in is shared between those two tubes. So when you remove that, when you remove this V1 of the channel you're not using, you get full signal to the preamp. So this basically will allow a little smoother tone, a little cleaner gain, not cleaner gain, but a little smoother distortion. And I don't mean distortion as far as, a fuzz pedal or, a metal zone. I just mean the amp clipping, the amp breakup. It will not influence headroom, but it just smooths the amp out. You get a little bump in volume, really, really hard to be extremely noticeable, but you do get a little lift in volume. And, it's a good mod to do. You get a free tube out of it to keep as a spare in case one of your other preamp tubes blows. And this kind of pulling the V5 kind of does the same thing for the vibrato channel. You know what I mean? It takes the load off of the element in the tube, heating the tube up, and it just keeps it into the preamp of the the circuit. Now, a few other things I like to do for the cleaner sound is I will put this right here. The V2 calls for a 12AX7, but I like to put a 12AT7 in there. And that to me is where you pick up a little more headroom on the note, a little more headroom on the amp, a little cleaner note, but yet you still have that onboard distortion through the circuit on tap if you really, really turn the amp up. So it just allows a little cleaner headroom on the note. The note doesn't really get as fuzzy. So what I like to do is put a 12AT in V2, And I have a really good new old stock Jan 12AT in the phase inverter. The phase inverter is basically going to come in to play, you know, I'm going to do another video on how to get these amps to crunch up, and we'll talk about that more. Coming down to your power tube section, if you wanted that cleaner, kind of tight snap, then I would bias my power tubes on the lower side. Not low to where they're straining, but if you have a range of, like, say, these are 6 V6s, but if you're working with a 6L6 and you have a range between 29 and 35, which Fender usually likes, I'll go maybe 30, 31. And also, this is a tube rectifier, and you may hear some people talk about solid state rectifiers. What that basically does is, if you would put a solid state rectifier in here instead of a tube rectifier, it basically tightens up the amp, it tightens up the attack. You don't get that natural warm tube sag, and it just kind of stiffens everything up. Now, getting back to the speaker, a lot of Fender flaw is the Fender flub, as many people talk about, many people have. I like to put a high-powered speaker in my Fenders, not because I'm trying to copy anybody or be like anybody, but I like what the string does, and I like how the note blooms with the tighter speaker, you know. Some of the stock Fender 25-watt speakers, when you really push the amp, they kind of fold into themselves, and that's not something I'm looking for. So I'll go with a high wattage speaker, and there are other speakers that work great. Celestians work good in here, Jensen's, you know, Jupiter speakers. There's a lot of speakers in here. Right now I'm using an Altec 12-inch. It's kind of like a cross between a JBL and an EV, and I really, really like this one. So now getting into the front, when you come to set it up, you know, I like to run the volume pretty high, you know, 7. That's when I feel like the Blackfaces really start to shine. The treble I will run at about 5.5, 6. You know, with amps with a mid-range knob, you know, guitar is a mid-range instrument. Keep that in mind. You don't need to go heavy with the mids, but usually 6, 7. And with Fenders, I won't really run the bass much past 3, if anything, especially when you're playing with that kind of volume, because when you introduce that kind of volume, you're introducing a lot of low end as it is. So you really don't need to have the bass way, way up. It's really that simple, guys. Those are just a few things that I do. And like I said, I prefer a 12AT in V2, and I prefer a new old stock Jan or GE in the phase inverter spot, 12AT as well. Now, if you want a little more breakup and a little less clean headroom, you can put a 12AX7 in V2, and that sometimes I do that depending on the place I'm playing. If I need to kind of just take the edge off it and I can't have it too spiky and hit it too hard. But really, using low gain tubes, biasing a little cooler. I like the solid state rectifier, and a high powered speaker or a heavier speaker. You know, if you have an amp that's 35 watts, maybe putting an 80-watt speaker in there will really, really shine for you. So those are just some things I do to clean it up. Other than that, I mean, I try not to touch the circuits if I don't have to. And you also, when you're buying an amp, you kind of know what the circuit's going to do and you know what you're looking at, so you don't really have to modify the circuit. But I hope you can apply these. Like I said, these will work for your reissue Fender amps, and you get 2 extra tubes out of it to keep with you in case something goes wrong. And they're fun things to try, and if you don't like it, you can just put the tubes back in, you can turn the bias back. The only thing I want to mention with the bias is make sure you have a bias meter or you have somebody who knows how to bias your amp, because you can, you know, cause some damage if you over bias. Mostly you'll puke out a tube or a rectifier tube. And if you're swapping to a solid state rectifier, it's always good to recheck and adjust bias again. So I hope you guys can apply these. I'm going to do a video following up to this about how to get it a little crunchier, a little breakup earlier, a little smoother. And look forward to that one soon. But this one will kind of give you that cleaner, spanky Texas tone. So peace.